It's time for my favorite segment on this channel where I watch the first episode of a good chunk of the currently airing shows, report my findings, and usually make a recommendation based upon that. This time I checked out a grand total of 13 shows, the most I've ever done, so sit back, get your favorite drink, boot up Overwatch, browse your favorite website, do whatever you like to do because this is going to be a long one. The original Love Live, which feels very odd to say, was a massive mainstream commercial success, which is a rarity in the anime industry, and when it does happen, you can bet that the executives are going to do everything they can to keep that going. Now for myself, I wouldn't say I'm a huge Love Live fan, I never even finished the original series, but I do like some of the characters and their designs, and I find a lot of the songs to be genuinely good, which are the two main ingredients required for a successful idol franchise. So enter this new Love Live series, Sunshine, where there's already been a shit ton of merchandise available before a single second of the show even aired, and after watching the first episode, I can see why they're that confident. This show is incredibly safe, going as far as to make characters that fit into the same archetypes as some of the original cast. The first episode was about this girl, Chika Takami, whose name I had to look up, never a good sign, and she was inspired to start her own idol club after seeing the original Love Live girls perform. I admit that this was a clever touch, but I don't think we're getting a Love Live school idol cinematic universe anytime soon. She goes around trying to recruit members to join, and none of these characters really stood out to me, except for the bitchy student president one that says she's not going to allow a school idol club on campus. Spoiler! She's gonna join the club! I always thought that visually, Love Live was quite lackluster, specifically those big performance scenes where they would make heavy use of CG and not in a tasteful way. Unfortunately, those CG stage shows are back, and they grind my gears just as much as they did in the original. Even just in normal scenes, too, colors kind of look washed out and somewhat blurry to me. Love Live Sunshine is exactly what you think it is. Love Live's version of Idolmaster Cinderella Girls, continuing the franchise without running the risk of burning fans out on the same cast of characters. Whether the songs or characters will have the same kind of impact as the original Love Live remains to be seen, but for me, I'm not really feeling it with Love Live Sunshine, and would only recommend it to hardcore Love Live fans or just idol anime fans in general. Orange is one of the shows that I was looking forward to because the original manga that this is an adaptation of is quite highly regarded, but I still had slightly tempered expectations because it still is a shoujo manga, which is a style that I'm not really into, probably because I'm not a teenage girl. Much to my surprise, however, the first episode of Orange was pretty good. It starts off by introducing us to the main character, but at age 26 in the future, where she regrets the choices that she made. Then we cut back to her in high school at age 16, and she's getting a letter in the mail from this future self, chronicling everything that will happen and directing her past self to make the choices that she didn't make. She doesn't believe the letter at first, but that changes when it correctly predicts that a transfer student will join her class. As far as first episodes go, Orange does a great job of setting itself up, making the relationship between this transfer student and the main character progressed enough to make me interested in where it's going to go. The reveal at the end of the episode, which isn't really a reveal seeing as it is in the plot synopsis on both my anime list and Crunchyroll, is that this transfer student is no longer alive in the future, which I'm sure is going to lead to some very interesting scenes where this main character is going to have to choose between listening to the notes or listening to her present self. I'd say that Orange is definitely worth checking out to anyone who's into drama romance stuff, even if you're like me and not really a big fan of shoujo stuff normally. Over the past 2 months, I watched the past 3 seasons of Prisma Ilia, and I did that so I could talk about this 4th season. If you set aside the incredibly explicit and jarring fanservice scenes, the first 3 seasons of Prisma Ilia were relatively typical magical girl fare, but I have to commend the show for being able to keep my attention for those 30 episodes. Easily, my favorite part of the show is just Ilia herself, who has a great character design, both in magical girl form and not, as well as her voice acting that sounds as if she's always yelling even when she's speaking at a moderate volume. Not really sure how to describe it, but I love it. I like Kuro a lot as well, great voice acting too, and she provides a nice contrast to Ilia's character. So now we enter this 4th season that starts off a lot more serious in tone than the past 2 seasons. Whether or not it stays that way remains to be seen, of course, but Ilia gets sucked into this alternate dimension where there's no one there at all except for this one new character that we've met so far. At least a good chunk of, if not all, of this season is going to be about Ilya finding Miyu in this alternate world and bringing her back to the normal one. There's really not much more to say other than that. It's just more Prisma Ilya, and if it sticks with this more serious tone that's most similar to the first season, then it can end up being one of the more compelling seasons. It's difficult for me to recommend that you watch what will be 40 episodes worth of Prisma Ilya by the time this season wraps up, not even counting the OVAs and specials, because you're not really missing out on anything by not watching it that you couldn't glean from GIFs online. For what it's worth, though, it's a competent series that has decent art, decent animation, and serves as a nice spin-off to the world of Fate Stay Night for those of you who are into that. While walking around Akihabara 2 months back, I was almost certain that New Game was just some anime that happened to slip under my radar, considering the amount of posters and advertisements that I saw for it. Turns out it's actually a 4-koma manga that started back in 2013, and it's just now getting its own anime adaptation from Doga Kobo, who did Sanshou Sanyo, try saying that one 3 times fast, last season, which ended up being one of my favorites from that season. While New Game has a very moe style and is a slice-of-life comedy as well, it's actually about an 18-year-old girl that starts working at a game company, which is incredibly refreshing. I can't think of another anime that has a moe art style like this that's not about middle or high school-aged characters, so it's already got my attention in that regard. This first episode was all about this main character Aoba's first day at work, meeting all the people she's going to work with, each of whom have their own quirk, like the one girl that will only communicate through text messages. I actually really enjoyed it. It has a nice art style, a vibrant color palette, it's funny, it's cute, and endearing. The way it sets up these gags within these little sketches reminds me a lot of Is the Order a Rabbit, and that it shows its 4-koma roots. In some ways it also reminds me of Shirobako, just because of the setting in this office full of girls working on stuff, but I sincerely doubt it'll be even remotely as serious or as informative as Shirobako was. I would recommend New Game unless you just absolutely hate moe slice of life, but even then, the non-school setting and older characters might make this more palatable for you. Sometimes you'll find a show that sounds really interesting on paper, but then when you watch it, it's anything but. 91 Days is a perfect example of that. The plot and setting seem solid, being set in the Prohibition era with the mafia ruling the town. The first few scenes start off strong too, setting up the motivation for this main character, Avilio, and his hatred of this mafia. Avilia's family was murdered when he was a young child due to a mafia dispute, so he leaves town and then comes back many years later seeking revenge after getting a mysterious letter in the mail. It soon devolves into complete nonsense once Avilio reunites with his childhood friend that now makes bootleg alcohol. Avilio then convinces this friend to sell his alcohol to the mafia, which leads to this scene in a bar, which is where things really start going downhill. This blonde guy comes in, presumably from an opposing mafia family, and then starts shouting all these names that we as the viewer have no knowledge of or context for, so you'll just be left sitting there confused and bored out of your mind. 91 Days suffers from the same issue that Joker Game last season did, where it thinks it's really clever and really interesting, but it's actually neither of those things. After this confusing bar scene, the main character and his friend escape with the 2 mafia guys they were trying to sell to in the bar, and the one reveals himself to be one of the names that this blonde guy was shouting, and they do it at the very end of the episode as if this is some kind of shocking revelation. Well, it isn't, because I have no idea who this guy is, or why I should be so surprised by who he is. The visuals started off very strong, but increasingly became more and more inconsistent as the episode went on. Mind you, this is within the span of 1 episode, not over the span of a few or something like that. Again, I do give some credit to the boldness of the setting and time period, but just like Joker Game, that's not enough to make this something that I would want to watch any further. I wouldn't recommend this show based on the first episode. The first thing you'll notice if you do decide to watch Alderamin on the Sky is the absolutely hideous character designs, particularly the faces. The noses are really weird and elongated, almost like a squid, and they have those lips that are like shiny and protruding. It's not a good look. Otherwise, the visuals are competent, but all I could look at was those faces. It's a shame too, because if it wasn't for that, the visual style would be comparable to something like a Fire Emblem game. Alderamin on the Sky's plot is the anime equivalent of a modern young adult novel, something like The Hunger Games, and not in a good way. You've got this group of kids that are in some sort of military training on this boat, but the boat sinks and our group of kids narrowly escapes to an island with an extra mysterious passenger. The passenger is actually their princess, and the island is in enemy territory. You know where this is going. Now you might ask why I decided to check out this show if the premise seems so bland and disinteresting. Well, let's take a gander at who produced this thing. Wait, what? This Art Club Has a Problem is an incredibly simple adaptation of a 4-koma manga about a high school art club full of useless members that don't actually want to do art except for the one. The main gag here is that the one boy in the club, Subaru, does draw but only draws 2D waifus, seeking to create the perfect waifu. Now normally I would dismiss a show like this, but when I watched it, it actually had quite a bit of charm. Aside from all these gags about waifus, you've got this other girl character, Mizuki, that actually does do real art and has a crush on the guy drawing waifus. Then things get really interesting when we have this Kyoto animation style scene of these two walking home, and the girl starts crying because she thinks this guy likes his waifus more than he likes her. Now this could actually be a decent show if this relationship actually progresses and isn't just a gag that gets reset every episode, but it's kinda hard to tell. So is it worth checking out? It might be, if it's not an episodic type thing and has an actual plot. It might be similar to something like Love, Chunibo, and Other Delusions, which I know was a rather popular show. Real Life was somewhat destined to be one of the more talked about shows of this season due to its abnormal release schedule, with all 13 episodes of this show being released simultaneously, Netflix style, rather than being aired weekly over a 3-month period like every other show in this video is. I'm not sure how or why this happened, but it did. While the odd release might have been what got me to check out this show, my genuine enjoyment of it is what kept me watching. I watched this show when I was about halfway through checking out all of the shows that I'm covering in this video, and I had to forcefully pry myself away from Real Life so I could get on to other shows. I'm 11 episodes deep into the show, and unless the ending just sucks, Real Life is going to be one of the best rom-com drama shows I've seen in a long time. Real Life is about 27-year-old Kaizaki Arata, whose career is at a standstill after failing at every job interview he's done for months. He's then given the opportunity to become a test subject at the Real Life Research Institute, where he will take a pill that makes him appear 10 years younger and then attend high school for a year as a normal student, with the promise of a job afterwards if everything goes well. It sounds incredibly gimmicky and cliched on paper, but it's handled with such a good amount of confidence and a little bit of humor, making it feel kind of natural and not stupid at all. Once Arata goes to this high school, he starts making friends, and we then follow him and these friends as they solve conflicts. The real highlight of this show is the surprising level of maturity, because Arata isn't actually a teenager. Rather than the usual obsession with silly high school issues, we get more of a mature retrospective view from someone who's already been there and done that. That's not to say that there isn't lots of drama, but it's not that grating, whiny bullshit that a lot of other shows suffer from. I don't want to say too much more about Real Life because I might make a separate video about it since I can finish the show whenever I want, but I'm really enjoying it, the characters are really likable, and it's surprisingly mature. I definitely recommend Real Life, and it's the one recommendation on this list that you can take with a little more certainty because I was able to watch so much of it. Ange Vierge starts things off very poorly with its first episode. We're immediately thrust into this nonsensical fight scene where these girls are flying in the air, fighting what looks like a carbon fiber penis. Not sure if this is some sort of intentional phallic imagery, but the fight scene doesn't look good at all. Then right after this, we get an incredibly boring information dump about the bland universe these characters live in, where there's 4 different planets and alternate dimensions that are now in the same dimension. I'm not really sure. I couldn't be bothered to give a fuck about it, and no other reasonable person would. The only redeeming quality of this show is the inevitable Megami Magazine posters that will get put out for it, seeing as the entire first episode, other than the intro fight scene, takes place in a bathhouse where every character is being obscured by light streaks and steam. Ange Vierge is not worth your time. It's not worth anyone's time. When I saw that this show was adapted from some sort of Chinese webcomic, my curiosity got the best of me. I thought, it's Chinese, so maybe it's fresh, or at least an interesting novelty, right? No, nope. This has to be the single most boring first episode I watched out of anything in this video. It's even more low energy than Jeb Bush. And in addition to that, the plot occurring on screen is incoherent and nonsensical. Since what happened is so incoherent, why don't we check out the synopsis on my anime list? Surely it can help to decipher what I watched. One day, Zhang Shulan is attacked by zombies in a graveyard. In the midst of that situation, he saves the life of a girl, throwing the kitchen knife in his hand in order to kill the enemies. The girl tells Shulan, who is relieved, to face his hardships head-on and leaves. However, Shulan later sees that girl again at his university. Okay, so this is a new one. It seems that the creators of the show don't really know what the fuck happened either, because parts of the synopsis didn't even happen. Zhang Shulan doesn't save this girl, she actually beats the shit out of him, and then she kills the enemies with a kitchen knife. At least they got that last detail right, the least important one. I'm also struggling to remember this scene where the girl tells Shulan to face his hardships head on, because that didn't happen either. She actually throws him into a grave, starts shoveling dirt on him, and then leaves without saying anything, as this field of zombies that are there for no fucking reason start to converge around Shulan. The plot isn't the only shit part of this show either. The main character Shulan is unbearably annoying and stupid. This dude literally sits in a 2-foot deep hole and lets this girl shovel dirt on him, and he's not incapacitated or anything like that either. The character designs are bland at best, the animation is kinda bad. I would describe this show's look as being something from 2005 that no one gave a fuck about. Which isn't surprising considering the no-name studio that patched this pathetic thing together. Hitori no Shida is not worth checking out. No one should check this out. The only thing this show has going for it is that it is a genuine Chinese cartoon, but apparently Chinese cartoons fucking suck. Continuing this trend of surprisingly mature anime, Sweetness and Lightning is about a high school teacher whose wife died 6 months ago, and he's now struggling to raise his daughter single-handedly. I commend this show for not beating the viewer over the head with the whole dead wife thing. It's done very tastefully and in a non-whiny way, which actually makes it a more effective emotional tool. The first episode frames what will presumably become the format of the subsequent episodes. This father can't cook very well and buys his daughter prepackaged meals. He eventually feels bad about that and then takes his daughter to the restaurant of one of his students who then makes dinner for them. Sweetness and Lightning has a very bright visual style, and I particularly liked how vibrant the animation was. And while I enjoyed the first episode, I thought it was rather heartfelt, but I kind of get this feeling that this slice of life show might wear thin over the course of 12 episodes. In a lot of ways, Taboo Tattoo, stupid name by the way, is a lot like Hitori no Shida, but since it's being made by JC Staff, it tends to be a little more competent. Taboo Tattoo also features an incredibly obnoxious main character that gets the shit beat out of him by some random girl. As the name suggests, this show's major plot device revolves around fucking tattoo superweapons that were developed by the Americans secretly and have now been smuggled into Japan. Our incredibly obnoxious main character saves some sketchy guy from being robbed, and as thanks is given a tattoo superweapon. Then the girl that beats the shit out of him is from America and is trying to get the tattoos back and explains that every tattoo has its own trigger, hers being chalk. But it turns out our hero's tattoo is triggerless. Wow! Yeah, this shit is boring as fuck, and I couldn't wait for it to be over. And while it might look better than Hitori no Shida, it's still not a great looking show. The fights are bland as anything, and the backgrounds in particular look very low effort. If Hitori no Shida looked like something from 2005 that no one cared about, I would describe Taboo Tattoo as something from 2010 that no one cared about. Taboo Tattoo is not worth checking out. The fights aren't great, the main character is annoying, the premise sucks. This show doesn't have much going for it. Wow, this fucking show. I really did save the best for last here. I could forgive it somewhat if it was just 20 minutes of pure fan service, but it tries to actually have some sort of plot and explanation for its bullshit. I mean, check this synopsis out, it's all you need to know. Hida Kazuna possesses the HxH, Hybrid Heart Gear ability, but it is not strong enough to make him particularly important. His older sister calls him to transfer to Strategic Defense School, where many of the students, many of which are large-breasted girls, use their HxG abilities to fight invaders from another world while wearing extremely skimpy pilot outfits. Kizuna's fighting ability doesn't measure up, but his sister has another plan. Apparently having erotic experiences with Kazuna will allow the girls to replenish their energy or power up. It looks like his new high school life is going to be full of embarrassment. Now you might be asking, what's wrong with some fan service? Doesn't everyone like that every once in a while? Well, let's look at a screenshot. As you can see, it's not even good at fan service. Is this supposed to be seductive? Because this is way past the point of being large-breasted. Those aren't even breasts. Those are fucking tumors. This might be racy in the context of Japanese television, but other than that, it has no reason to justify its existence. So is Masou Gakuen worth watching? You know what? The first 5 minutes might be worth watching, if only to see that synopsis happen on screen for yourself. As always, if there's a show I didn't get around to watching that you thought was worthwhile, leave it in the comments down below. I've also gone ahead and put links to the My Anime List pages for each of these shows in the description, so you can find the romanized Japanese name, name of the studio, or just look into the show further.